Italy, a nation facing oblivion. With a birth rate in free fall and a staggering debt-to-GDP ratio hitting 330%, the country is literally dying out. Add to this a brain drain as the youth flee in search of brighter futures, and we must ask ourselves, is this the end for Italy, or can it prevent itself from becoming just a historical footnote? Welcome to Living History. To understand the situation better, let's briefly go back to the 1970s. At the time, the fertility rate in Italy was about 2.5 children per woman, a number that ensured a stable and growing population. This period was a time of economic optimism, with the post-war industrial boom fueling growth and prosperity. However, fast forward to today, and this rate has dwindled to a mere 1.24, a figure alarmingly below the 2.1 threshold needed to maintain a stable population. In fact, in 2022, Italy recorded fewer than 400,000 births, a record low for a country with a population of approximately 59 million. The dwindling birth rate, coupled with a significant portion of the population over 65 years old, over 24% and rising, sets the stage for a demographic time bomb. The impact is visible in the empty playgrounds and silent streets, once bustling with the laughter and energy of youth. This demographic shift isn't an isolated phenomenon. It's deeply rooted in Italy's social, economic, cultural, and religious evolution over the past century. Historically, Italy was predominantly an agricultural society, where large families were the norm, serving not only as a social structure but also as an economic necessity. Children were assets, helping on farms and contributing to family income. The Catholic Church, wielding significant influence, advocated for large families, considering them a blessing. However, post-industrial Italy saw significant changes in family dynamics and societal roles. The economic incentives for having large families diminished as Italy transitioned from an agrarian to an industrialized economy. The financial cost of raising children skyrocketed, with current estimates suggesting an average expense of around €175,000 per child up to the age of 18. Thus, for many Italians, especially in the context of a stagnating economy, having children became a luxury rather than a norm. The economic implications of this demographic crisis are profound. A shrinking population means fewer consumers, fewer workers, and consequently a contracting economy. Italy's debt-to-GDP ratio has skyrocketed in recent years to around 330%, placing it among the highest in the Eurozone. This level of indebtedness is catastrophic, as academic research indicates that when the total debt-to-GDP ratio surpasses 300%, economic growth begins to decline, and living standards start to fall. Italy crossed this threshold around 2010, which unsurprisingly aligns with the onset of its economic decline. The result? Negative GDP growth for over a decade, with no clear signs of recovery in sight in the near future. This, though, is only the proverbial tip of the mountain of problems Italy is facing. With an aging population comes increased healthcare and pension costs. But with a shrinking workforce, the tax revenue to support these expenses is dwindling. The pay-as-you-go pension system, reliant on the current workforce to fund retirees, is on the verge of collapse. With each passing year, the burden on the working-age population grows heavier, threatening to destabilize the entire economic structure. Since 2012, Italy has been experiencing negative prime-age population growth, meaning there are fewer workers to support the economy and the country's debt obligations. The country is even on track to surpass Japan in having the worst demographics in the developed world within the next 2 to 3 years. Things are so bad that the European Central Bank, ECB, recognizes Italy's inability to repay its obligations and has implemented policy tools, such as the Transmission Protection Instrument, to support Italian bonds and prevent another full-blown European debt crisis. That's not all, though. The political landscape in Italy further complicates the situation. The instability, partly stemming from economic challenges, has led to political crises, including the resignation of Prime Minister Mario Draghi in 2022. And there's more. Right-wing politics are on the rise. A lot of this is about how people feel about immigration and keeping Italy's cultural identity intact. Immigration, seen by some as a solution to the workforce shortage, is a contentious issue, with fears that it is eroding Italy's cultural identity. Sounds familiar, right? Kind of like what's happening in France, which we covered in a previous video that we will link at the end for you, but let's not digress. Currently, Italy is dealing with a huge wave of migration. Over 85,000 people arrived by sea in 2022 alone, including about 10,000 kids without their families. That's a lot of people, and it's been tough for Italy to handle this influx. Reception centers reflect the struggle to manage the rising number of arrivals. The government's residency permit program for undocumented migrants working in essential sectors has seen only 61% of roughly 207,800 applications approved, leaving many in limbo. This scenario presents a complex picture of Italy's approach to immigration, balancing humanitarian obligations, EU regulation regarding the processing of asylum seekers, and internal political pressures. And to top it all off, there's the north-south divide in Italy. The mode industrialized north is doing pretty well comparatively, but the south, with its more agrarian way of life, not so much. Just consider this. Lombardy, in the north, has a GDP per capita equal to 127% of the EU average. On the other hand, the GDP of Calabria, in the south, is only 56% of the EU average. Needless to say, this is causing a lot of tension. And it's pushing young folks, especially from the south, to look for better chances elsewhere. This whole situation is leading to a brain drain in Italy, and it's leaving everyone wondering what the future holds. You see, while the country's overall GDP is expected to grow, albeit slowly, reaching 0.7 in 2023 and potentially even 1.2% in 2025, this growth is not uniformly distributed across the country. The northern regions are faring relatively better, thanks to some savvy investments and shiny new infrastructure. But then there's the south. Despite pouring over 230 million euros into social housing, the south still seems to be playing catch-up. This cash injection is part of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, NRRP. Think of it as Italy's economic energy drink. The plan's goal: to give the South a much-needed boost. However, there are signs that these efforts might not be sufficient to bridge the gap with the more prosperous North. A major issue is the lack of adequate professional resources to manage these funds effectively, and the limited scope of the projects, which often exclude vital infrastructure like roads and motorways. The underinvestment in such critical infrastructure has been a long-standing issue in Italy. In fact, between 2008 and 2015, total investment and maintenance spending on Italian transport infrastructure plummeted by 58%. This has had some rather dramatic consequences, like the tragic collapse of bridges, quite literally demonstrating the crumbling state of Italy's infrastructure. Another layer to the issue is the role of criminal organizations in the south, and let me tell you, it's not just about Sicily's godfathers. These gangs have spread their tentacles all over mainland Italy too. Take the Camorra in Campania and Naples, the 'Ndrangheta in Calabria, and the Nuova Sacra Corona in Puglia. They're controlling whole areas, grabbing government funds like they're picking apples, and getting into everything from kidnapping to smuggling drugs. And guess what? These mobs love recruiting desperate young people. It's like they're running a Join the Dark Side campaign, adding more trouble to Italy's already rocky economic outlook. The sad truth is that with a birth rate in steep decline and an economy that's struggling to find its footing, Italy is seeing its younger, working-age population look outward for better opportunities. This migration, driven by the search for a brighter future, is a cycle that feeds into itself. A dwindling birth rate leads to a shrinking workforce, which in turn prompts more young people to leave, deepening the demographic decline, resulting in the slow death of Italy and a government struggling to find any consensus on how to tackle this. To find out more about the challenges facing other European countries like France, check out our next video, linked here. See you there.